Well, it's time to wrap up the 2020 draft analysis, and we're going to do that by starting off with the Seattle Seahawks. Coming up next will be the San Francisco 49ers, but let's get to the Seahawks. And they had one first-round pick. It was 27th overall, and they drafted Jordan Brooks, a linebacker out of Texas Tech. I gave the pick a B+. I think Brooks is a very instinctively good player. He played all 4 years while he was at Texas Tech, got a lot of experience. He's got good athletic traits, and he's pretty well built. I do think he needs to work on his coverage a little bit, and I think that's probably the biggest thing holding him back. I think what will help him out a lot is the fact that I think Bobby Wagner, in my opinion, is one of the best coverage middle linebackers in the league, so hopefully Wagner can teach him a few things, show him a few things, and help him develop. So I think that could end up being a pretty good pick for Seattle, especially if they develop him nicely. So not a bad pick there. Definitely helps. I don't know if it was the biggest need for Seattle, but they did draft a good player. That takes us to their second round, 48th overall pick, in which they drafted Darrell Taylor, another outside, well, this one was an outside linebacker from Tennessee. I gave this pick a C+. Again, I think not really a need, or not maybe their biggest need. Maybe somewhat of a need, but not their biggest need. And I don't know if it's the right guy. But Taylor is an athletic beast, I will admit that, and however, his on-field ability and football intelligence are a little bit lacking. He does need to develop a little bit more rush and counter moves to get past the lineman, and I do think that his diagnosing of the run and the pass needs to become a little bit more seamless, as sometimes he gets confused and doesn't quite recognize the situation. So I think if he can improve his techniques and moves, then he might have some potential, but he needs to get to learn the game a little bit better and be a little bit more aware of what's about to happen and what the offense runs. So overall, I think that needs to be taken into account. Another thing on Taylor is that in 2017, this is probably the biggest question mark or the biggest cloud over him, is that he was suspended in 2017 for kicking a teammate in the face during a fight at practice. So that's scary, and hopefully the character is a little bit more under control. But with that being said, I think this was a gamble and a player they didn't necessarily need to take, and I think there was a little bit better choices out there. So interesting pick. That's why I gave it a C+, and we'll see how he does down the road. With their third round, 69th overall pick, they picked Damian Lewis, guard out of LSU. Gave this pick a B-. Lewis, it was a little bit of a reach to draft him in the third round, but there's nothing wrong with that. He's a very good run-blocking guard, and Seattle does run the ball a lot, so that's key. I think he lacks a little bit. He lacks field awareness, and I think that can limit him. He also lacks lateral quickness, which is not good either, especially for moving down the field, and he lacks arm length, which is key in the pass protection, and I think those all hurt him in the pass blocking game when you had him up, diagnosing blitzes and such. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he develops and whether or not how much of a role he'll have in Seattle. Okay, so they had two fourth-round picks. Their first one was 133rd overall in the draft, and they picked Colby Parkinson, tight end out of Stanford. I gave this pick a B. Seattle doesn't really have any big names at tight end, but they're not terrible. And I think Parkinson can definitely add to the bunch. Seattle's getting a huge target in the passing game by picking Parkinson at 6'7". He's really, it's a tough matchup with somebody that tall. for receiving. So I will say that's never a negative, I guess, to have somebody at that height. So good height, good pass blocking skills with this tight end. I do think he's going to have some work to do to get a little bit better, a little bit more consistent of a threat. I mean, he's not the best receiving tight end in the world. You do like some of it. And if I said pass blocking, that is my bad. I meant to say pass catching. His blocking overall is actually not good, so it's a little bit questionable there. So I don't think he'll be their starting 3-down tight end, but you definitely look for him to come in on some sets and be used as a wide receiver, possession-ish kind of guy. He's not going to, make huge plays, but he'll gain some yards and maybe get him some first downs. So not a terrible pick in the 4th round for Seattle. Definitely room to develop for Colby Parkinson. Their 4th round, 144th overall pick, they picked DJ Dallas, running back out of Miami, Florida. This pick I gave a C. Because to me, he's not a bad player, but I don't know if I would have picked him. But let's go more on Dallas and let me explain why. He is a very versatile player. He could play in the backfield or out as a wide receiver. He also has return abilities, which you have to like. Dallas is an inexperienced runner, however. He doesn't really run hard. My bad. He's inexperienced as a runner, but he does run hard, and that you have to like. But, however, I don't think that this was a huge need for Seattle, which is why I wouldn't necessarily taken him. However, I do think they have someone more here that could probably learn a few things from Tyler Lockett, come out of the slot, and with the return abilities. I just don't know if he'll have enough playing time or if he's even good enough to really make a huge impact for the Seahawks. That takes us to their 5th round, 148th overall pick, Alton Robinson, defensive end out of Syracuse. Gave this pick a C because to me he played playing at Syracuse. Robinson, in my opinion, played in the worst Power 5 conference, and even his numbers saw a pretty big decline in 2019 from 2018. So I think he really lacks the instincts and the techniques needed to be not just a starter in the NFL or a potential starter in the NFL, but also a consistent force on the defensive line. I won't say that he's got no potential, but I don't see I don't see a high ceiling or much. Definitely not much impact year one for him, and could be more of a down the road development piece, but definitely not in the beginning. So that takes us to their 6th round, 214th overall pick, Freddie Swan, wide receiver out of Florida. I gave this pick a B because I do think it is somewhat of a need for Seattle, and I think with his punt and return abilities, I think he could learn. He can also learn a lot from Lockett playing the slot and with the punt returns and such. So I think he'll be an average player in the league and see a little bit of playing time and hopefully have a slight impact for Seattle's offense. Last pick, they drafted in the 7th round, 251st overall, Stephen Sullivan, tight end out of LSU. Very inexperienced player. I gave this pick a C. He is a wide receiver in a tight end's body, basically. But he really rarely played, caught very few passes at LSU. And so we'll really see if he's got the skills or if he'll get enough repetitions and experience to develop into what Seattle thinks he might be. So overall, with that said, I gave Seattle a C+ for their whole draft. I thought Seattle has had better years. Excuse me. But overall, I think Seattle's had better years, especially when it comes to drafting. And drafting in the lesser rounds, I feel like they've been able to find some guys that have been pretty good for them. I don't really see the home run talent in this year's draft. I don't really think they filled all their needs, and I think they got even a little bit repetitive with a few of their picks. And I felt like they drafted guys with pretty low ceilings, not a lot of room for develop, or maybe they lacked some of the natural instincts and abilities needed to succeed in the NFL. So wasn't a fan of all that, but it wasn't terrible, but I didn't think it was great. So overall, I gave Seattle C+. And coming up next is the finale, the final video in our NFL draft analysis, and we'll be covering the San Francisco 49ers 2020 draft class. So stay tuned, and thank you for watching my draft analysis videos. Thank you.